about your shirt too. A competing shirts thing. Here we go.
No competing. All love, right? Welcome to Let's Talk About It Tuesday. Sponsored by Phoenix Souls. One of my main men, Jacob Rivers, just opened up a new shop. Kind of forgot what the address is, but it's Phoenix Souls on Instagram. Check it out. Vintage gear, very, very cool. I was there. It was popping. You got to go. Obviously, I'm not a fashion guy, but I know enough to know that what he's got going on is very, very cool. So check it out. Phoenix Souls.
Right on. Happy Let's Talk About It Tuesday. I'm Georgette. I'm the mom.
And I'm TJ. I'm the son.
And we both study and work in the field of psychology, and we are passionate about sharing what we know with you so that you can live your best life. And so today we're going to talk about changing your reward pathway.
Ooh.
So it all starts, we'll start the discussion with habits, because just like other things we talk about, there are good and bad, right? Good habits often arise out of repetition, and once established, allow us to no longer have to think about that behavior. You know, we're kind of on autopilot. Like, I don't have to think about what I prepare for my husband's breakfast every morning. By the way, it's 4 hard-boiled eggs and a sausage patty. No mental energy goes into that. So what's an example do you have of a habit?
Probably like the order in which you like clean yourself off in the shower or something, an order on how you brush your teeth, floss, this, that, you know, so on and so forth. Because over time, our brain naturally, and we're going to get into this obviously, but I like to kind of say some stuff every once in a while and make it seem like she's not the only smart one. Yeah, we have these pathways, right? Depends on the study you look at, between the average person has about 50 to 70,000 thoughts in the day. There's a lot of thoughts that have to occur without our understanding, which is why our brain is kind of like a television channel with 2,000 channels, all the different situations and plans and shows, right? So we have all these things built up so that a lot of these things can be done automatically, but oftentimes that can end up getting problematic too.
Right. So today we're going to really focus on those pleasure-based habits, and those are the habits that are ingrained as a result of activation of that reward pathway. Right. So the reward pathway actually refers to a bunch of structures in the brain that are activated by rewarding stimuli.
Serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. It said better than that.
Norepinephrine.
That thing.
I very rarely get it right, so I'm kind of pleased with myself right now. The amygdala, that's responsible for emotion. So like the feeling you get from eating a juicy burger, that's, you know, that amygdala, it makes that association for you. The hippocampus is involved. It triggers those memories. That's where you store that information. I remember where I had that great hamburger. So there's all kinds of brain structures involved in the reward pathway. But usually when you think about it, we think about that dopamine reward system. Right.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We have, short-term and long-term ways to get there, right? Obviously, I do addiction counseling primarily. So obviously we talk about synthetics, drugs, opioids, things like that. What that does is it allows your brain to release high levels of dopamine extremely quickly, which is the reason why we subconsciously feel the drive and maybe the impulsivity to go back to those types of things. Because once again, your brain just remembers how safe it makes you feel, right? And it reminds you of that so much that you'll feel it for a very short period of time, and you normally come crashing back down as far as dopamine levels are concerned, creating a new baseline, a lower baseline, more defensive, more walls up, and you continue to ride this roller coaster throughout the day. If you're doing the negative things to produce that dopamine, it's going to make it harder and harder for you to be the person that you eventually want to be, right? So then you have low dopamine reward, right? Finishing that workout, right? Eating nutritious, doing purposeful and meaningful work, right? Those will release very low levels of dopamine, but enough for it to be sustained for a much longer period of time. So you have to look at your day, kind of building the staircase up towards your happiness, because it's not something that's created automatically. What are the things that I can do that science says will release a lot of dopamine naturally? And the more that I do that, even if my thoughts or my emotions are outside of my control, the more that I do these things, neuroplasticity, your brain will eventually change and say, hey, you know what? We are habitual creatures more than anything. Let's just keep doing this because this is a new pathway. This might help for the future. Right. Is that good for you?
Yeah, I'm speechless, actually. You are just kind of looking over my notes real quick to make sure that everything that was said needed to be said, and I think it was. So, right, nice job. The interesting thing I think about what you said was that that pleasure we receive has different intensity levels. I think that's really kind of an interesting point, because we don't often think about that. You know, I eat chocolate, and I know I shouldn't, And so I try to avoid it. I can go months without having it, but I'll have one piece and I get a good pleasurable feeling. So I want to repeat that behavior. But like you said, with drugs, that level of intensity is that much stronger.
But then you look at addiction. This is where we start to look at it's not just about synthetics. Now, here's another example that a lot of people can relate to, right? Isolation, right? You're about to get out. You're about to leave 30 minutes away from leaving to those plans. All those thoughts are, man, I have to do this, man, I have to do this, man. You know what? I'm just going to bail. Yeah. Safety, dopamine. I'm just going to bail, watch TV, get in the blankets, feel all good. Woo, 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 woo. Feel good for a very short period of time. But then guess what? Right before you go to sleep, it's like, man, I bailed on my friends, right? I spent the night doing something that did not help me get closer, did not help me do anything, even remotely close. Down, new baseline, lower self-esteem, which as we know, $50,000 to $70,000, the more that you knock down your self-esteem, the more likely that's going to be the baseline the next time it is kind of addressed. So yeah, it is getting through that little discomfort. Once again, we know that eating cookies is going to release this. That's where the discipline, we have to know that eating carrots is going to release this, but you'll be able to sustain it for a much longer period of time. And once again, the more that you do it, it becomes a habit. 92% of the thoughts that you have today are most likely repeats from yesterday. So if you continue to put different ones in, once again, your brain's eventually going to be like, you know what? That's a pathway this person wants. And then the other ones start. So it's not about fighting the old. It's about connecting with some of these new reward pathways.
Right. So every time I eat chocolate, I reinforce that reward pathway, gets it stronger, makes it harder, so that when I don't eat chocolate, I have this craving. Right?
Yes, ma'am. And when you have that emotional pull, it's just saying like, I don't want to, the fat lasts longer than taste. It's remembering about how much it ruins your day, all these things. So they do studies of, people that are addicted to meth, they look at meth and they get a really high level of craving, but you can see them legitimately talk themselves down. And now that may be really hard and it may knock it down only a little bit so you can't feel it as much. But the more that you do that, once again, feed these new pathways, connect with these new passions, these bonds, these activities, these behaviors that produce high levels of long-term dopamine success, because that is ultimately what's going to make it a lot easier for your thoughts and emotions to be more so in your control.
Right. And the brain physically can change if a behavior is repeated enough, right? Making those changes long-lasting, even permanent.
Yeah. Well, neuroplasticity is extremely strong, right? The example that I normally use with, and whenever I'm talking about it, but there's some disorders, or diseases that you have to get your brain cut straight in half. Right. And if anyone understands how the brain works, right is control the left motor function, left's control the right motor. So there's a lot of questions, comments, concerns about how well they're going to move, kind of going out of it. 3 weeks, 4 weeks post-op. So of course, there's some issues as there is to be of removing 50% of the brain. But even as young as 3 years old, they're walking, they're playing all happily, right? And they do brain scans. The brain notices that loss of neural tissue and says, oh my goodness, we need to make up for that. And that is just with 50% of your brain. If you have 50% of your car, you're not getting to work. If you have 50% of your phone, you're not texting and telling everybody how freaking awesome this podcast is, right? But when you have 50% of your brain will change and adapt to make it to 100 and make it something so strong. So if you have 100% of your brain, which I'm sure a lot of you do, why can't your thoughts and behaviors eventually change? Because we feel that discomfort. We're like, oh, it's not working. No, it's not working. You can't think the same way for 10, 20, 50 years. Change the thoughts and it's going to work in weeks, months, years. But the more that you continue to do it, science shows that your brain has everything already in it to change for the better.
To reduce that reward or disable that reward pathway that you have, you really take some self-control.
Discipline and once again, connecting elsewhere.
Right. Self-control, Dr. Roy Baumeister, who's a psychologist at Florida State University, equated it to a muscle. So
you got to work out the brain every day.
Exactly. And the other thing too is like a muscle, it gets weak too sometimes. So like the first time that you try to resist an urge, you might fight it, but the second time it might be a little harder.
You have a bad night's sleep or your brain's a little bit weaker. You had to fight with something that day, it's a little bit weaker, right? But once again, discipline, right? And having faith and knowing that the more that you continue to say no, I promise you eventually it's going to get easier, even though it might not feel like it. Your brain is changing in your favor.
Right. And so it's going to take a while to strengthen that muscle. Regular acts of self-control, though, even small measures can help build that muscle, strengthening that resolve that you have.
Build those pathways so that when you're not necessarily paying attention, your brain acts on these pathways a little bit more automatically, right? Now, when I wake up at 4:45 in the morning, it's not even a question. It's not even a question. I have to get up and do something. And for anyone who knows how long I've been working out, it has taken an extremely long time. But seriously, now it's just automatic. Now I just go and I buy the cucumbers. I just go and I buy all these things. I just go and do all these things. I go and do gratitude lists because it's gotten to the point now that those are now my automatic tools, as opposed to some of those other automatic tools that we go on, which is just looking through Facebook, looking through Instagram, not really doing anything impactful. So just every little thing is impactful in your day. Reward dopamine for yourself.
Some approaches you can take to trying to build that self-control or that self-discipline is to become aware of your unhealthy habits. Maybe identify one or two you want to change.
Boundaries, write them down. What are the thoughts that lead you to it? What are the emotions that you feel that make you do it? What are the behaviors that lead into it? Then new behaviors, practice. New emotions that those behaviors might actually invoke, right? Excitement. Do things that'll make you excited. Do things that'll make you content. Do things that'll make you, feel love or gratitude. Right? And once again, thoughts, how can I think my way out of this? Because when they start to go, if you have the answers, the more that you practice, now you eventually get to the point that you can be better. But it takes practice and it takes looking yourself in the mirror.
Right. And so developing strategies for countering them once you have them identified, but also understanding what triggers them and avoid those triggers. Sometimes you're with certain people when you do those certain bad habits, and maybe you need to
set boundaries, talk to them. If they don't like it, you shouldn't have them as friends.
Visualize yourself with your temptation. Mentally watch yourself and practice, rehearse how you're going to avoid that temptation.
Your brain has a hard time differentiating whether you're doing something in the brain or in the body. So our brain or actually out there in the world. So if I visualize myself shooting a basketball, if you had electrodes on me, my muscles will be flaring in that area. If you visualize, as lame as it sounds, visualize yourself doing it. You are actually building that pathway so that you are more likely to automatically go to it or feel more confidence from an emotional standpoint when you do it. So that will aid in the practice. That goes in the diaphragmatic breathing, making your body and mind as open, as calm, cool, and collected as possible, less reactive from an external stimuli from a neurological standpoint. You are going to be more open and receptive. And the more that you introduce these when you're open and receptive, the more likely these are going to latch on. So they will latch on. Just keep going, keep working.
Also, actively replace unhealthy habits with good ritualistic ones, like flow activities that get you so absorbed that you actually reward pathways, different pathways for that. Or pick habits that, well, for lack of a better term, are compulsive, like exercise. Like you get endorphins from exercise. That makes you feel good as well.
We can talk about good habits in another episode.
We could.
Just list like stuff. Meditation, journaling, artistic, social interaction, bonds and passions. I'm awkwardly not finding a sixth one, so talk now.
What's important to understand, though, is you are not erasing that old habit. You're suppressing it. It is still there. It may be dimmed down, like to use a term, I hope I used it correctly, like you talk about.
Dim down, not as much danger towards it, right? And then also give yourself some empathy, because for a lot of people, it's like, I still feel the urge to do this, but the urge eventually gets to a point where it's just a fleeting thought, right? So once again, have empathy. You may still feel the craving, but the more that you feed these other ones, science says, once again, eventually you will get there.
Right. Maybe use that urge as a fuel to fire your healthy, like I am not going to let that urge.
So how much money you're saving off of alcohol, how can you invest that back into your own education or into things that you really enjoy? Right? With all the free time, what can you do with the free time? What are some rewards? Once again, look at it as now we're getting rewards for you doing these things as opposed to you just doing something that's extremely difficult, right? You gotta not only give yourself the dopamine, the mental reward, but also kind of the physical reward as well. Giving ourselves every line of defense, because once again, it's more so that we just have these really built up pathways towards some of these more negative things. And the more you build with your thoughts, with the meditations, with the behaviors and practicing these things, your brain once again will change. There's nothing that you can tell me that the brain will not be able to change. You are creating new pathways. You are. It's hard, but look it up. There's not a whole lot else we can do.
Right. So this week we want you to think about that self-control as a muscle and deliberately and routinely exercise it so that you can live your best life. So have a great week, and we will see you next Let's Talk About It Tuesday.
Flexing the brain, baby. My head's getting so big. Red, I mean, geez Louise. Dinosaur brain, I couldn't think. Well, now you got to click.
And here we go.